In 1950, the United States played in a World Cup match against England. England were one of the favorites to win the entire tournament. They had invented the modern game. They had professional leagues, generational talent, and the quiet arrogance of a nation that had taught the world how to play football and fully expected to be repaid with victory. The United States, by contrast, were a team of part-time players, a postman, a dishwasher, a hearse driver. Men who played football on weekends and worked regular jobs during the week. Nobody gave them a chance. The English press hadn't even bothered to send journalists to cover the game. It wasn't worth the trip. The final score? USA 1, England 0. It is still considered one of the greatest upsets in the history of the sport. And it is almost completely irrelevant to what followed. Because, after that miracle result, American soccer went almost completely quiet for the next 4 decades. No World Cup appearances. No professional league worth speaking of. A country of 300 million people, the most powerful sports market on Earth, that treated the world's most popular game like a curiosity. Something the kids played on Saturday mornings and then abandoned for football, baseball, and basketball. And yet, in 2026, the FIFA World Cup is coming to the United States. Not just coming. Arriving in its biggest form ever. 48 teams, 16 cities, 3 countries. The largest World Cup in the history of the tournament. How does a country go from sending a dishwasher to play England in 1950 to hosting the entire world 76 years later? That story is more deliberate, more dramatic, and more improbable than almost anyone realizes. The moment that changed everything doesn't involve a player, a match, or a stadium. It involves a vote. In 1988, FIFA, the governing body of world football, awarded the 1994 World Cup to the United States. The decision was controversial almost immediately. Soccer in America was, at that point, genuinely marginal. There was no top-flight professional league. The national team was ranked outside the top 20 in the world and had not qualified for a World Cup since 1950. FIFA was essentially handing the world's most-watched sporting event to a country that, by most measures, didn't really care about the sport. The logic from FIFA's side was simple but audacious. The United States was the last great untapped market for football. If you could crack America, if you could make the sport matter to 300 million people who had disposable income and a deep appetite for live sports, the commercial upside was almost incomprehensible. This wasn't charity. It was a calculated bet. And attached to the bid was a condition that would change American soccer permanently. If the USA wanted to host the World Cup, they had to commit to establishing a professional soccer league afterward. That condition planted a seed. A small, uncertain, underfunded seed. But a seed. The 1994 World Cup opened on June 17th at Soldier Field in Chicago. And something happened that surprised almost everyone, including the Americans themselves. People came, not just people, masses. The tournament drew an average attendance of nearly 69,000 per game, a record that stands to this day as the highest average attendance in World Cup history. Stadiums that had been built for American football, never designed with soccer in mind, were filled to capacity for match after match. The opening ceremony, the group stage, the knockouts. The final between Brazil and Italy at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena settled on penalties in front of 94,000 people, the largest crowd ever to watch a World Cup final. America didn't win the tournament. They reached the round of 16, losing to eventual champions Brazil in a tight, respectable match. But something shifted in the cultural temperature. For a month, the country paid attention to soccer. Sports bars filled up for games that weren't American teams. Neighborhoods with large immigrant communities poured into the streets for their national sides. Children who had been playing the sport on Saturday mornings watched the best players in the world do it at the highest level and felt something click into place. The seed FIFA had planted in 1988 had found soil. In 1996, Major League Soccer launched. The professional league that the USA had promised FIFA as a condition of hosting the World Cup was real. It was not initially impressive. The early years of MLS were defined by artificial surfaces, low salaries, and a style of play that felt like a lesser version of what the rest of the world was doing. Attendance was inconsistent. Television ratings were modest. The league was kept alive more by institutional commitment than by organic enthusiasm. But it survived. And survival, in the early years of any institution, is everything. Slowly, deliberately, MLS expanded. New teams in new cities, purpose-built soccer stadiums replacing the cavernous football venues that had never been right for the sport. Investment in youth academies, in coaching education, in the infrastructure that produces professional players over a generation rather than overnight. The national team grew alongside it. The USA qualified for every World Cup from 1990 onward. They reached the quarterfinals in 2002, the deepest any American team had ever gone. Players began emerging who were genuinely world-class. Landon Donovan, Clint Dempsey, Tim Howard, whose 16-save performance against Belgium in 2014 remains one of the greatest individual goalkeeping displays in World Cup history. Then came a generation that changed the ceiling entirely. Christian Pulisic, Weston McKennie, Gio Reyna, Tyler Adams. Young Americans playing at the highest level of European club football, at Chelsea, Juventus, Borussia Dortmund, and doing it not as novelties, but as genuine contributors. The country that had sent a dishwasher to face England in 1950 was now producing players who competed at the Champions League level. Not occasionally, consistently. In 2018, the United States, Canada, and Mexico submitted a joint bid to host the 2026 World Cup. They were competing against Morocco, which had submitted its fifth bid to host the tournament, and came in with genuine passion and ambition behind it. The joint bid won. 4 votes to 24. The scale of what FIFA had approved was unprecedented. 48 national teams instead of the traditional 32, an expansion designed to bring more of the world into the tournament and, not incidentally, to generate more matches, more revenue, and a longer period of commercial activity. 16 host cities spread across 3 countries: Vancouver, Toronto, Kansas City, Dallas, Atlanta, Miami, New York, Los Angeles, and others. Stadiums with a combined capacity that dwarfs any previous World Cup. The projected economic impact: over $5 billion for the United States alone. The tournament begins in the summer of 2026. The final will be played at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey, the same New York metropolitan area that is home to the largest media market in the country and the eyes of the world's press. Here is the number that tells you everything about how far American soccer has come. MLS, the league that launched in 1996 with struggling attendance and borrowed credibility, now has 30 teams and is expanding. Its most recent TV deal is worth $2.5 billion over 10 years. Season ticket waiting lists exist in cities that barely knew what soccer was 20 years ago. Lionel Messi, the greatest player in the history of the sport, an 8-time Ballon d'Or winner, a World Cup champion, chose to end his playing career not in Europe, but in Miami, in MLS, in America. When Messi signed with Inter Miami in 2023, the club's season ticket waitlist went from around 10,000 people to over 150,000, essentially overnight. That is not the behavior of a country that doesn't care about soccer. That is the behavior of a country that has been building toward caring about soccer for 30 years and has finally arrived. The story of American soccer is not a story about a moment. It's not about the 1950 upset, or the 1994 World Cup, or Messi in Miami. It's about what happens when an institution, a league, a federation, a sporting culture, decides to build something and then refuses to stop building even when the results are slow, even when the critics are loud, even when the evidence of progress is almost invisible from year to year. MLS was mocked for most of its first decade. The national team was dismissed as perennial underachievers. The idea that America would one day be a genuine soccer nation was treated, in much of the world, as wishful thinking from a country that already had enough sports. And yet, here we are, 2026, the biggest World Cup in history, coming to the country that once didn't think soccer was worth its time. The dishwasher who played England in 1950 would not recognize what his sport has become in the country he represented. But maybe he'd recognize the principle behind it. Show up, even when nobody expects you to win. Keep showing up. Eventually, the world comes to you.